Hello my friends, welcome to my corner. Today I would like to honor all of the women who have won the Nobel Prize in Literature. I'm gonna share with you some information about their work, and I am also going to show you one book by each. Now I do want to say, the works that you're about to see are not necessarily the masterpiece by each one of the authors, or maybe not even their most important work, but in some cases that will, I believe, actually be the case. We're gonna go by chronological order, and the year in which the award was received is going to appear on screen. So without further ado, my friend, I give you the women of the Nobel Prize in Literature. Enjoy. Our journey begins in the year 1909 with Selma Lagerlöf, the first woman and also the first Swedish author to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. She is primarily known for her fiction, which captures the customs, the geography, and the folklore of her native land. Her most famous work, as you may know, is the children's book, The Wonderful Adventures of Niels Holgersson. But I wanted to recommend to you the saga of Gösta Berling. This is a fantastic episodic novel full of romance with a fascinating and complex character at its center. I have done a video on this one, so you are welcome to check it out, of course. Next we have Grazia Deledda from Italy, and I'm showing you here a book from the Nobel Prize collection. I'm going to show you in particular one work by her. She was associated with the literary movement known as Verismo. That literally means realism, but this is a kind of realism that is closer to naturalism. Her main themes, according to a critic by the name of José Miguel Belloso, are love, fate, and death. She was primarily a novelist, and I want to recommend to you a very brief work by her. I'm going to see if I can show you at least the page. This is almost a novella, and it is titled The Mother. It's a very brief novel. It's about a priest and his mother, basically the only two characters that you can find in it, and it covers about 48 hours. So it's a very economical little novel, and I'm showing you here the introduction to the part of the book that focuses on her. Sigrid Undset from Norway. She was born in Denmark, and she was a novelist who excelled at the historical novel. Her most famous one, of course, is the trilogy Kristin Lavransdatter. This covers the life of a woman in medieval Norway from the beginning to the end. And the story is just deeply engrossing, and the style is simply beautiful. And there will be more to come about this, I promise that to you. Pearl S. Buck from the United States. She was the first US woman to win the award. She was born in the US, but she moved to China when she was only 4 months old. Most of her novels, as a result, deal with life in China. So, of course, I'm featuring here her best-known work, a winner also of the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, The Good Earth. This is an unforgettable, sympathetic portrayal of the lives of peasants in China, and it features a strong and incredibly real female character, the character of Olan, of course. I've done a video on this one in case you're interested, so feel free to explore that. Gabriela Mistral from Chile. She was the first Latin American author to receive the Nobel Prize in Literature. She was first and foremost a poet, but let me tell you, she also wrote lots and lots of nonfiction. She was a very prolific author. I'm showing you here an anthology of her poetry, which deals with many topics: womanhood, motherhood, the land of Chile, many, many more. This is titled, as you can see, Antología Poética, but for a collection of her poetry in English translation, check out the volume titled Selected Poems of Gabriela Mistral, translated excellently by Ursula K. Le Guin. So that's the one that I'm going to recommend to you. And I have a video on her poetry in which I also talk about the translation. So if you want more in-depth information, you can certainly find it in that video. Nelly Sachs from Germany. She was also a Swedish citizen. Her poetry focuses on the traditions and the suffering of the Jewish people. And here I have En las Moradas de la Muerte, and also a book that features something titled Poemas, simply poems, a selection of her poetry. En las Moradas de la Muerte is In the Houses of Death, which begins with her famous poem, Oh, the Chimneys. Most of her poems are very brief, you're going to notice, and they are striking in their imagery and also in their use of metaphor. So I have really enjoyed reading her work. It's very, very personal and very, or truly unique. Nadine Gordimer from South Africa, a novelist, but one who has a truly personal and deliberately paced style. Many of her works deal with the devastating effects of apartheid in all South Africans, and one of her most famous novels is the one that you're seeing here, July's People, which imagines a future in which white South Africans have lost political power and they must survive a civil war. Check out my video because I have done one on this one too. Toni Morrison from the United States. In her novels, she portrays the African American tradition in all its aspects, its history, its folklore, its joy, and its suffering. Some of her works have been associated with magical realism, but it is not the kind of magical realism that you would expect, for example, from Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is a different thing. Her most famous novel, you have heard of it, is Beloved, but the one I am showing you here is Sula, which explores the complex bond between two women who follow different paths in life. This is a very brief novel, but it is very powerful, and that's one of the reasons why I am featuring this one instead of the more well-known work by her. I have done a video not on this one, but on Song of Solomon, so just so you know, that video is there. Wisława Szymborska from Poland. She is one of my favorite poets ever. Her voice, her images, the length of her poems, her perspective, everything is perfect, if you ask me. And like all great poets, she makes you look at life in a different, personal light. What I have right here is titled Poems New and Collected, and this is simply one of the most enchanting collections of poetry that I have ever read. So let me recommend this one to you especially, of all the books that I'm showing you in this video. Elfriede Jelinek from Austria. And if you have explored her work, you know that all of a sudden we find ourselves in a very dark place. Jelinek has written plays and novels, but at least outside of Austria, she is known primarily as a novelist. The Piano Teacher, of course, was quite successful and was adapted to film by Michael Haneke, but here is Lust. Like most of her novels, this is a scathing depiction of Austrian society, and I think more accurately we could even say a dissection or even an autopsy. I think she would prefer those terms rather than depiction. Definitely not for everyone in theme, and here I am talking about the entirety of her work, not just this one that you're looking at right here, but let me tell you, her style is just superb and so powerful. Doris Lessing from the UK. She was born in Persia, but then she moved to southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, of course. She was an incredibly prolific novelist. She wrote all kinds of things. She wrote feminist novels, psychological novels, even space fiction. She did not call it science fiction, but space fiction. One of her most enduring works is the feminist classic that you are seeing right here, The Golden Notebook, which deals with communism, the sexual revolution, women's liberation movements, and features an intricate structure that involves several notebooks. Stay tuned because there will be definitely more to come about this one. Herta Müller from Romania. She is also a German citizen, by the way. When I think of her, I think primarily of an impressionistic style that builds a vision by putting together fragments, as in a mosaic. Her main theme is life under totalitarianism, And I have actually enjoyed a handful of her works, and one of my favorites is The Land of Green Plums, which follows four young people living in Ceausescu's Romania. I still have not done a video on Müller, unfortunately, but I definitely will. Alice Munro from Canada, of course. She is an interesting author because she has focused almost exclusively on the genre of the short story. She is, in fact, one of the masters of the genre. People have described her as an heir of Anton Chekhov, interestingly, and I assume that one of the many things that they could mean by that is that she tells her stories with sincere compassion for her characters. I have read quite a few of her collections, more than half actually, but the one that I am featuring now is The Moons of Jupiter, from the first half of her career. And the main reason why I chose this one is because it features one of my favorite stories by her, the title story, The Moons of Jupiter. And I am very close to this short story because it was, in fact, the first one that I read by her and the one that moved me to read as many as possible because I really enjoy her stories. Svetlana Alexievich from Belarus. Her work is very interesting in the sense that she gathers oral testimonies that allow us to hear history from those who lived it or from those who suffered it more commonly. She has covered many important events, most famously probably the Chernobyl disaster with her book on that, also the Soviet-Afghan War. What you see here is Second-Hand Time, The Last of the Soviets, which covers the end of the Soviet Union and the transition to capitalism. This one features her signature approach, which she calls documentary literature. So it's a great example of her style, and it is really something that is very interesting to explore. Olga Tokarczuk from Poland, of course. She is primarily a novelist whose works really push the limits of the genre. One of the best examples of that is a novel that received the Man Booker International Prize, Flights, which has been, as you know, tremendously successful. It's very important, this novel, because instead of focusing on a plot or on a main character, it favors a thematic approach, an approach that explores movement, traveling, migration, in a series of vignettes that you may read independently. There are many short stories included in this novel. So I like that idea. Instead of focusing on a main character, protagonist, or even on a plot, what we have here is mainly a theme. More to come about this, Jorge? You can be absolutely sure of that, my friend. Louise Glück from the United States. Her poetry is so ample, both in theme and in reach, and yet there are enough recurring themes for us to perceive that unity that characterizes serious authors. Critics have pointed out that trauma is one of her salient themes, but at the same time, it would be simplistic, I think, to call her poetry confessional, at least in the sense that Sylvia Plath's poetry is confessional. I really like her images of nature, and the classical allusions of some of her early poems, and the volume that you're looking at right now gathers most of her work, all of her collections of poetry except the last two, which I have also read and enjoyed very much. So this is, of course, Poems 1962 to 2012. Annie Ernaux. Surprisingly, the first French woman to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature, and so far, the only one. Her work is autobiographical. We could almost call it autofiction if we like that label. There are many connections to the approach of Patrick Modiano, but the subject of her work is much closer to her as a person. In other words, I would say that there is less of a use of masks in Ernaux's work. I'm showing you a very, and I mean very brief novel, La Place, which has at its center the figure of Ernaux's father. I have done a video on Annie Ernaux, but not on this particular novel. I talked about A Girl's Story. So if you want to hear more about her, let me refer you to that other video. And last but not least, we come to the end of our journey with Kang from South Korea. We spoke before of trauma, and Kang is just an expert at portraying that subject, whether it be at the personal or the historical level, or both. And speaking of both, as a matter of fact, a great example would be the one that you're seeing here, Human Acts, which deals with the Gwangju uprising and the massacre that followed it. The story is told through multiple perspectives. This is a very poetic novel and a very violent novel. And of course, you may know that I have done a video on it, so you are also invited to check it out. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. Please tell me about some of the books that you have seen. Are there any favorites of yours among them? What are some books that you have read by these authors? Some books that you would like to read? I do hope that this video leads you to your next favorite book. Those were the women of the Nobel Prize in Literature. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful day.